From a window I can see far below the Strand, a winding promenade lined with more huge white sanatorias and park-like plazas, the whole gay picture lavishly decorated with wisteria, cypress, magnolias, Lenin, and Stalin. Sometimes the vacationers merely congregate in quiet groups. But when I start taking movies, they often crowd around and actually relax. I soon learn why. Away from home, the Soviet worker is less constrained. No one knows him here, and hence isn't as likely to report his activities. But their ignorance of the Western world is shocking. On all sides, I hear the same question. Is it true the poor workers in Los Angeles have to go into debt to buy automobiles because it's too far to walk to the capitalist factories? Why don't American people want peace as much as the Russians do? They're eager. They're hungry for news of the outside world. But simply can't believe what you tell them, even to the purchasing power of a $5 bill. Next morning, I'm driven up into the nearby hills to be shown a movie studio's out-of-door sets, escorted by Miss Yalta.
Your guide of yesterday, Mr. Fedor, is today with a visiting delegation because he speaks Chinese. I am only recently within tourist. I was a state artist myself with the ballet, so I am very happy to visit my colleagues at the cinema.
We meet the star of the movie, a 17-year-old girl whose face bears that ineffable something which photographs. Miss Yalta proudly informs me that all movie studios and theaters are operated by the Soviet Department of Culture. I leave her on the movie set happily engrossed and stroll around the hillside to discover a road-building crew, members of a teenage organization called the Young Pioneer Girl Workers. Then I return to the movie location, where I find Miss Yalta so happy, she takes me to a former Tsarist pavilion, now a military post, and not only brings out a couple of the officers, but allows me to photograph her with them. Nice, isn't she? Be even nicer in a closer shot, but she says this is not permitted without a special permit. But tomorrow, the schedule again. Miss Yalta and I drive to a state school to witness the gala celebration of a graduating class. I can see why this is an in-tourist must, for the children are impressively healthy and well-dressed, including the red neckerchiefs which are always worn as emblems of their youthful patriotism. The graduation ceremony is entirely a tribute to the Soviet teachers, so no parents are present. But some of the youngsters carry flowers sent by proud father or mother who is off somewhere busy at work. Let's visit the capital of the Ukraine, the city of Kiev. I already know quite a bit about Kiev. A friend of mine was born here in Mother Russia. I know that 85% of Kiev was completely destroyed in World War II. So somewhere beneath this newly rebuilt city, beneath all these modern structures, the state-owned shops, the groups of tourists from the far corners of all Russia, the Stalin architecture skyscrapers, beneath all this is buried the powdered dust and ashes of the old city, including that ancient ghetto where lived the largest Jewish population in Europe. That is, until Hitler and then Stalin decimated it to the present 30,000. But Miss Kiev doesn't want to discuss that. Oh yes, meet Miss Kiev. She is a cheerful, bustling chain smoker, about 22 years old. She speaks good English, is so new to her in-tourist job that I am her first customer. For several days, she shows me what I'm supposed to see, including her own college, the University of Kiev, where she majored in languages.
And this is our university park, overlooking the Dnieper River. You can see that everyone here is studying or reading. Nothing is more important to us than learning. The boy wants the advantages which come with achievement in science, medicine, and engineering. The girl, well, a woman has to have a job. The better the education, the better the job.
Yes, feminine charm and attractiveness don't seem important. And even family life comes second to their work. Many are reading English, such books as the H.G. Wells science fiction, More than one is buried in Theodore Dreiser's An American Tragedy. And a 15-year-old is absorbed by Jack London. What's your favorite English reading, I asked Miss Kiev. She smiled.
I love Robinson Crusoe. He was such a good worker.
Then I turned my long Zoomar lens on the river.
You must not do that, sir. You have no special permission to photograph those factories across the river.
Factories? I don't see any factories.
Neither do I, but that atomic lens on your camera can see farther than the human eye and will photograph things 20 miles away.
For an apprentice guide, Miss Kiev seems pretty well indoctrinated. But as if to make amends, she asks some soldiers to pose before the statue of St. Vladimir, who brought Christianity to Russia in the 10th century. In his honor was built the beautiful Vladimir Cathedral. The church is open and well filled. Today is Sunday, even though not observed as such in Russia. But the congregation consists mostly of elderly women, some old men, and a few children. Where are all the young people, I asked Miss Kiev.
You saw them at the university yesterday. Religion is for backward people only. These elderly people remember the old days. But soon they will be gone and out of the way. It's young Russia we're interested in.
Bright and early next morning, she's back with more schedule. The Lenin Park. Here is a manual training school where youngsters are taught to be railway workers by actually being engineers, firemen, conductors, and switchmen under the supervision of an adult technician.
Everything about the railway is realistic, a smaller version of the standard Russian train. See how seriously the children go about it. This is not play. Their faces show their adult gravity. The children are thinking only of what they are learning. If they do not learn well, they will not earn their membership in the Young Komsomol, the Junior Communist League, and that would make them very unhappy, just like children all over the world.
Yes, just like children all over the world. Only these have already been drilled into that adult gravity, which, everywhere I go, is the face and the faces of Russia. This, then, is the Russian accent on youth, adult gravity for children. Next day, to a collective farm, where the farm director explains that this is a collective of 500 families. They pool their labors to work this state-owned land, and each family, as well as the combined group, must meet certain monthly quotas of farm products. Later that afternoon, I get my first real personal contact with the Russian worker himself, or in this case, ourselves. For once again, except for the male supervisor, the men seem to be somewhere else on more productive efforts. This is the Ukraine, the breadbasket of Europe. And I couldn't help but think back to the agricultural exhibit in Moscow and the Ukraine pavilion with those modern farming machines used in the Ukraine. This is the Ukraine, the government of which is far away in the Kremlin, which also governs the Soviet Socialist Republic of Georgia. Georgia, ancient Georgia, in the long shadows of the Caucasus Mountains. Georgia with its 20 centuries of bloody struggle for independence until it fell to Russian conquest in 1801. Georgia with its tiny town of Gori, and enormous for such a small place, its Stalin City Hall, begun by Stalin himself, but when he died, was never finished. But still standing and beautifully maintained is the Stalin Shrine, the marble pavilion which frames and encloses the tiny wooden cottage where was born in 1879 to a family named Zugashvili, a little boy who later called himself Joseph Stalin. In Russian and also in Georgian, for the languages are entirely dissimilar, the tourist is informed that Comrade Stalin, the great leader of progressive humanity, lived here in his childhood. There are 2 rooms with meager furnishings, adorned with pictures of Lenin, of Father Zugashvili, who was a shoemaker, and Mother Zugashvili, and the little Zugashvili boy grown up. The current rumors in Georgia that Stalin's body will be moved here. There are also many other rumors among the Georgians who often rebelled against Stalin, but he still has his statues all over the place. Halfway from Gori to the Georgian capital, Tbilisi, or Tiflis, is the ancient town of Svetogovili. Here the ruins of a 4th century Arab fort. The Georgians fought the invading Arabs, too. Overlook a 6th century Christian cathedral, which hasn't closed its doors since the days of Tamerlane. In the theological seminary of this cathedral, Joseph Stalin, as a young man, studied to prepare himself for the priesthood. I think it's not unfair to say he didn't make it. Georgian priests have, as a matter of record, declared themselves independent of the Russian Orthodox Church, quite regardless of whether it exists elsewhere or not. I see truckloads of Russian troops on the roads of Georgia, contrasting with the frequent flocks of sheep brought down from the hills by native Georgians, who, as you can see, are quite different from the other Russians we visited. Georgia is agriculturally the Soviet's second richest republic, outranked only by the Ukraine. Here again, I see the women are doing the work. The capital, Tiflis, is an old city. And if you don't think Georgians are hard to handle, look at all the old stone forts on the hilltops commanding the city. For the ancient Greeks, the before-mentioned Arabs, the invading early Romans, and the marauding Mongols from Asia all had their hands full keeping the Georgians on their Sunday behavior. Here I am told of banners recently paraded, reading, "Long live the independent Georgian Republic." My in-tourist guide and interpreter, Mr. Tiflis, is young and Russian, not Georgian. At the university, he surprisingly tells the local joke that the iron gates are not to keep the Georgian students in, but the Russian soldiers out, since the grounds are regularly patrolled. When the Kremlin decreed this institution be renamed Stalin Tiflis University, the student body rioted in favor of the old name, University of Georgia. One such demonstration resulted in 300 students wounded or killed. There are no traffic problems in Tiflis, unless you count the gypsies coming into town from the outlands to barter off some sheep or goats. And apparently this private enterprise is officially winked at. But recently the Kremlin announced that the 300,000 wandering gypsies here in Southeast Europe must register. The gypsies say Moscow wants to conscript them into labor units. So they pop into town, conduct a little free enterprise, and are gone. Late that afternoon, I slip out of the in-tourist hotel for a look at the vast spaces of Lenin Square. But across the square, I see a disturbance. A small riot starts in a bus between some students and an MVD man. In Moscow, the crowd would have instantly scattered in fear. But here in Georgia, everybody likes a good fight. I hurry over, too, and promptly get arrested by the MVD. This may be freedom-loving Georgia, but it's also Russia. And so is Sochi, on the Black Sea, more famous than Yalta for organized vacations. Miss Sochi of In-Tourist meets me here. She brings my schedule and shows me its required aspects of Sochi. The clean, wide streets, the lovely parks and statues, and the many blooming flower beds. Noting who's doing the work, I ask Miss Sochi the obvious question. Why are women doing these jobs? I get a new answer.
Because it's glorious to work.
What are the men workers doing?
Some work is more glorious.
I give up on that subject.
300,000 Russian workers are given vacations in Sochi each year. And 16 more ships are being added to the Black Sea luxury fleet. This, Mr. Feder, is the magnificent Stalin Opera House. Here you may have a choice. You may go inside now free as an official tourist, or pay 32 rubles for a ticket and see a performance.
I look at Miss Sochi. How about 2 tickets? She nods, accepts my 64 rubles, and departs for the in-tourist office, leaving me to examine the billboards, which announce both Grand Opera and the nationally famous Moiseev Company in a folk ballet. At curtain time, bringing the 2 tickets, who arrives? Miss Sochi? No. A bespectacled young man, Mr. Sochi. next morning, Mr. Sochi announces we will visit the Black Sea bathing beaches. I recall reading that here they sometimes go bathing in the healthy altogether. Or at least I did positively hear that the girls wear bikinis. The beach is not sand, it's hard, sharp stones. But the sun is shining brightly, and the vacationers are getting their suntan. This is a sex-segregated area, for men only. And the girls are all beyond that canvas wall. But here on another beach, sex desegregation. The males and the females are permitted to mingle. And it's the men who wear the bikini. Here, official beach regulations advise you the proper exercises to perform in order to be strong and healthy. But those lifeguards in the little rowboats, I turn to ask Mr. Sochi what they're looking at. And he in answer turns me back again to see a girl just emerging from the water. And Mr. Sochi says that next on my schedule is something even lovelier. It's flowers, Sochi's famous flowers. Thousands and thousands of gorgeous blooms. And here the visiting vacationers come to look in amazement at blossoms they've never before seen or heard of. And because the state furnishes them vacation transportation, room, board, everything including free movies, the vacationers have rubles to spend, and literally nothing else to spend them for but the finest flowers in the world. But over in the food department, 2 trucks unload a batch of surplus new potatoes. And quickly, the local Sochi householders crowd around and line up to buy. Mr. Sochi isn't happy about me photographing this.
Mr. Fedder, the flowers make brighter pictures.
So we go back to the flower department and watch the vacationing visitors to whom all this beauty is a happy revelation. It's my last day with Mr. Sochi.
Today, our luxury ship, Russia, makes it a memorable one for 425 Soviet citizens. For the first time since the revolution, a Russian ship is to make a pleasure cruise around Europe, allowing the average Soviet citizen to meet and to mix with the people of the capitalist world.
Some weeks later, in the harbor at Havre, France, I see the good ship Russia again and learn that 2 of the average Soviet citizens on board are a Miss Bulganin and a Miss Khrushchev. This is Russia, where the Kremlin handles everything. It also handles the 1,000,000 square miles of the Soviet Socialist Republic of Kazakhstan. You fly in Russia only by state-owned airlines. En route, I photograph across the Tian Shan Mountains to China, where atop these mountains is the boundary line between Kazakhstan and the Chinese province of Xinjiang. Kazakhstan's capital, the city of Alma-Ata, which means father of apples, boasts a new railway station. The sign reads, "Save your money in the Soviet Bank of Alma-Ata." This is a Russianized Asiatic city, even to an old Russian custom, the rollicking fancy dress and burlesque makeup of a Russian wedding celebration. Alma-Ata Market, I have 2 in-tourist escorts. Mr. Alma-Ata, who speaks no English, and a Russian girl, Miss Alma-Ata, educated in Shanghai, whose English is fluent and British. The Alma-Ata market is new and bustling, with its large, crowded conglomeration of Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, Turkoman, and others so Mongolian they might just have come from China. The market sells everything from fresh meat, freely exposed for the customer to examine, to roll your own tobacco, and second-hand clothing, and an occasional little private enterprise on the side. In this kindergarten, the native children make it very clear that geographically we're deep in Oriental Asia. To be exact, we're directly north of New Delhi, India, about 1,000 miles north. And I'm reminded of the Russianized Asia program, for these youngsters are starting out that way. segregated in a school for 100% Kazakhs with 100% communist-trained Russian teachers. Here, the little Soviet citizens of Asia are having their outdoor recreation hour, while Miss Alma Ata explains.
These Kazakh youngsters are taught exactly the same things as the children of Moscow, and in the Russian language. There would be no sense in them learning about the old Kazakh ways, for then they did not have the glorious freedom they are enjoying now. Just look at them, Mr. Feder.
I look, and all I see on the little Oriental faces is adult gravity. Next day, we encounter a parade of students from the Kazakh Academy of Sciences. Both Russians and Kazakhs march side by side, a proportion about 50-50.
The banners say, "Forward together as brotherly champions of peace." They are marching to the Academy Park to receive awards for their athletic achievement.
But here I see the Russian undergraduates lined up by themselves in one separate group, and the native Kazakh students gather together in another. That evening, Miss Alma Ata and I are to attend the concert at the Lenin Opera House. The house is packed, almost entirely with Asiatic Russians. Next, my in-tourist chaperones take me on a motor trip up into the Tian Shan Mountains.
This is wheat and apple country. Those apple trees remind me of my husband. He is a tree surgeon working in Siberia. And here, higher up, is grazing country, state-owned sheep country. The sheepherders wear the padded Kazakh jacket against the cold. And here, still higher up, is a mountain village called Cherin, where the local agricultural fair exhibits the products of the region. The fair won't be open for several days, but the director will show us some of the wonders of Kazakhstan, the largest vegetables in the world. This is a most important exhibit, and official delegations from Egypt and Romania will be here next week.
Before we leave, I ask Miss Alma Ata and Mr. Alma Ata to pose together for my camera, but she abruptly declines and moves quickly aside. Suddenly, our mountain road climbs to a dead-end stop. My in-tourist escorts admit we're lost and confer in Russian.
This seems to be a summer resort. The sign says, "Bonds of friendship in ancient world bring peace to all."
But the word P-A-I-X means peace in French. French? Here a few miles from China, a summer resort. Beyond it, I explore a little, and I find a huge road building project. A new 4-lane highway is under construction. A new 4-lane highway heading east. Straight for where? My in-tourist guides say they don't know. So I christen it the road to nowhere, and they laugh. I don't mention that my private classification is the road to tomorrow. I wonder if it's called the road to tomorrow within the walls of the Kremlin, which now permits me to see the Paris of Russia, the once imperial city of Leningrad, where in-tourist escorts me to the 55-year-old Hotel Astoria. From the hotel, we make our way first to the main thoroughfare, the Nevsky Prospect, principal shopping center lined with state-owned shops and stores. Miss Leningrad turns out to be intelligent, earnest, and never at a loss for words.
Leningrad is the greatest city in the world for culture parks and museums. And here, enjoying our parks, are some of our Leningrad children. You see, Mr. Feder, after the child is born, the state takes charge, so the mother can get back to work as soon as possible.
Leningrad's parks are called culture parks because, for instance, of a statue of Catherine the Great. She ruled Russia for 34 years, enjoyed numerous lovers, and had them all put to death. More parks, more culture, a woman bootblack releasing another man for more productive labor. More ice cream. Ice cream is very popular, I mentioned.
Of course. It is excellent food, good for everyone. But we must hurry, Mr. Feder, to the next thing on our schedule. The former Winter Palace has been combined with the Hermitage Museum, making it the largest museum in the world. Some of these art treasures are recent acquisitions. We rescued them from the Nazis, who had looted them from the famous museums of Europe.
4 hours later, we're both worn out. Let's call it a day. Tomorrow, I'd like to see the famous Kirov Stadium.
Not tomorrow, Mr. Feder. The Kirov Stadium is closed.
But next morning, she secured a special permit for me to see the Kirov Stadium. It's not closed. It's very busy. It's just as I've seen it in pictures. Only Stalin's portrait is no longer beside Lenin. Several thousand people seem to be practicing something to instructions blared out of loudspeakers. I can see students, workers, athletes, and many uniformed groups. What is this? Not until next day do I see the official news bulletin that a gentleman named Tito is coming to. And I then knew that what I'm seeing now is a rehearsal for one of those spontaneous manifestations, demonstrating the popularity of some visitor who is, at the moment, very popular in Russia. Tomorrow, we drive north from Leningrad to another palace.
This was built by Peter the Great, so that on a clear day he could study the coast of Finland. I'm afraid we can't go inside. It's being made over as a culture and rest resort, but we can take a walk down along the fountain.
We've walked a lot. Why don't you rest while I have a look at Finland? On the other side of the palace, I find a group of laborers, teenage young pioneer workers again. The Young Pioneer program is a special part of the Soviet educational pattern. Here, for students not engaged in technical and scientific achievements, there is special emphasis on the practical labor trade. And these young girls are doing their classroom work. Suddenly, Miss Leningrad appears at my side.
Of what interest could this be to you, Mr. Feder?
I mildly explain that in my country, such work is usually done by men.
These patriotic young girls are freeing men for other work. Come, we must hurry.
We hurry. I photograph this village while my in-tourist folks are repairing a blow-up. It's typical of hundreds of villages I saw throughout the Soviet. But this is the first I could film. Judging by the antennas, there's television for everybody. But before the blowout is repaired, my camera is back in its case, and I proceed with the official sightseeing. For several more days, I see what they want me to see. More palaces, more churches. But when I ask to see inside certain cathedrals, Miss Leningrad says they're not on my schedule. Finally, I say I'm tired, and today I'll go back to the hotel for lunch. But I skip lunch, slip out and take a Packard-type taxi to the Cathedral of the Virgin of Kazan, where, unchaperoned, I can't get past the guards to go inside. Then quickly on to the Church on the Blood. No soap here either, but I manage a quick look in. It's now a warehouse for the theatrical scenery of the Leningrad Opera. It's an easy walk to the magnificent Cathedral of St. Isaac. Here the guards are willing for me to enter, but take my cameras away. I soon find out why. For St. Isaac's is one of the official Soviet institutes of anti-religion. Inside, this church is filled with paintings and murals showing the evils of religion. One depicts a bloated, cigar-smoking capitalist, bullwhip in hand, riding on a golden cross, carried by tortured peasants, preceded by Christ, clad in glittering gold. On another wall, a painting of the Pope. When looked at sideways, the Holy Father wears the head of a jackass. Again, Christ is shown and named as the Jewish fortune teller. And in other unspeakable poses, but I'd seen enough. No wonder they didn't let me take pictures inside. And before I got my cameras back, I saw two culture teachers bringing a group of little children into the front door. This is Russia, the Russia of the Kremlin. Not the Kremlin of museums and sightseers, but this, the most widely discussed group of buildings in the world today. So exclusive there are special NVD police to prevent anyone not authorized from even crossing the street to approach. For this is the Soviet Union's supreme headquarters that governs the most completely governed empire on earth, that can command the every human effort of 250 million people to its own desire, thus producing tremendous achievements in the technical science. But it also brings to the Russian people what I have seen in their faces. And what of the Russian people living under this paradox of power? On my last night at the Moscow hotel, strange noises arose from Red Square up to my bedroom. I take a camera and hurry down 8 flights of stairs. What's going on here? Here in the semi-darkness and the temperature below zero. Through the pre-dawn gloom, I see students, young workers. Here are thousands of people watching other thousands of people parading. The marchers all seem to know exactly the right formations to pass in front of the reviewing stand. But the reviewing stand is empty. There isn't a living soul up there to see the demonstration. There isn't a living soul up there for the marchers to salute. It can't be a parade, for they march across Red Square in one direction, then turn around and march back again. Why this manifestation? Why so senselessly early before sunrise? Who ordered all these battalions of marchers to come and march? Who ordered all these thousands of shivering spectators to come and approve? Who? Only the Kremlin could. Why? Only the Kremlin knows. The Kremlin, which has its own purpose for everything it does. And what that purpose is, concerns the world. The banners say, "Forward to victory through communism." This, then, is that nation which first flung an astonishing man-made satellite into the skies above us. This is Russia.